Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
There's a moment, and I think you know exactly the one I'm talking about, where you're standing in your own kitchen. Maybe it's early morning. The house is quiet, and you catch your reflection in the dark window above the sink. And for just a second, you don't recognize her. Not because she's older. Not because the years have done what years do. But because somewhere between raising everyone else, between being needed and being useful and being strong, you lost the thread back to yourself. The woman looking back at you has your eyes, your hands, your tired shoulders. But she's carrying something you never quite agreed to carry. And the hardest part, you can't even name what it is. I've sat with a lot of women. Across tables, across years, across that invisible wall that separates what we say out loud from what we whisper only to ourselves at 2 a.m. And what I've learned, what I've come to understand in my bones, is that the weight we carry isn't usually made of the dramatic things. It's not the big losses, though Lord knows those leave their marks. It's the accumulation, the slow, quiet piling on. It's the opinion you swallowed because the room wasn't safe. It's the dream you folded up like a letter you never sent. It's the yes you said when every fiber of you was screaming no. It's the apology you gave for simply taking up space. And here's the unspoken truth that I want you to sit with for a moment, not rush past, not intellectualize. Just feel. You have spent decades showing up for the arena of other people's lives. You've been in the front row for their battles, their graduations, their breakdowns, their breakthroughs. You've handed out water and bandaged wounds and whispered you can do this into more ears than you can count. But when did you last walk into your own arena? When did you last suit up for yourself? Theodore Roosevelt, and stay with me here, because this isn't about history, it's about you, gave a speech in 1910 that contained what became one of the most quietly devastating passages ever written. He talked about the man in the arena, the one whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, the one who strives, the one who errs and falls short again and again, but who, Roosevelt said, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. Now, I want you to notice something. For most of your life, you've been everything around the arena. The one who prepared the fighter, who cleaned up after, who held the space, who made sure everyone else had what they needed before the bell rang. And there is so much honor in that. Please hear me say that. The sanctuary you've created for others, in your home, in your family, in your friendships, that is not a small thing. Don't let anyone, including that quiet voice inside you that loves to minimize, tell you otherwise. But, there's a difference between choosing to nurture and being so afraid of your own unfinished story that you hide in everyone else's. And somewhere in that difference, in that gap between devotion and disappearance, lies the conversation we need to have. I think about a woman I'll call Margaret. She came to me at 63, this elegant, sharp woman with kind eyes and the posture of someone who'd been holding things up for a very long time. She sat down and the first thing she said to me, not hello, not how are you, but the first thing was, I don't know who I am when nobody needs me. The room got very still, because that sentence, 7 words, held 40 years inside it. 40 years of defining herself entirely through her usefulness to others. And now her children were grown. Her husband had retired. The frantic, beautiful chaos of a life spent in service to everyone else had quieted. And in that quiet, she didn't hear peace. She heard the deafening sound of a self she'd never fully met. That's where we're starting. Right here. In that uncomfortable, sacred, terrifying space between who you've been for everyone else and who you might still become for yourself. This isn't about reinvention. I want to be careful with that word because it carries too much pressure, too much of a suggestion that who you've been wasn't enough. This is about remembering, about picking up the thread, about walking, not running, just walking, back toward the woman who had dreams before she had responsibilities, who had quiet whispers of longing that never quite went away, no matter how loud life got. She's still there. I promise you, she is still there. And the arena. It's been waiting for you all along. Here's something they don't tell you about strength. Real strength, the kind that's been forged over decades of early mornings and impossible decisions and holding yourself together in hospital waiting rooms and at kitchen tables where hard conversations happened. That kind of strength has a shadow side. And the shadow side is this: when you've been strong for long enough, you forget that you're allowed to not be. You forget that vulnerability isn't weakness wearing a costume. You forget that asking for help isn't the same as falling apart. You forget that needing something, anything, for yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you human. But somewhere along the way, probably so gradually you didn't even notice it happening, you started to confuse endurance with identity. You started to believe that the woman who keeps going is more worthy of love and respect than the woman who sits down and says, "I'm tired. I need a minute. This is hard." And so you kept going and going and going until keeping going became the only thing you knew how to do. I want to talk about something that doesn't get enough airtime in the conversations women have with each other. We talk about grief. We talk about aging. We talk about loneliness and purpose and empty nests. But we rarely talk about the wound beneath the wound. The wound beneath the wound isn't the hard thing that happened to you. It's the story you told yourself about yourself because of the hard thing that happened. Let me say that again slowly, because I don't want it to slide past you the way important things sometimes do when we're not ready to receive them. The original wound, the loss, the betrayal, the disappointment, the moment someone looked at you and made you feel like you were too much or not enough. That wound hurt. Of course it did. But the wound that's still quietly bleeding, the one that's shaped decisions you've made for 30 years without realizing it. That's the story you built around the original wound. I'm too sensitive. I always pick the wrong thing. Nobody really wants to hear what I think. I'm better at giving than receiving. I should be further along by now. I don't deserve to take up more space than I absolutely have to. Do any of those sound familiar? Not because I'm clever, but because they're so common among women who've spent their lives pouring out. These aren't character flaws. They're not personality traits you were born with. They are adaptations. Brilliant, protective, survival-level adaptations that helped you navigate a world that wasn't always gentle with you. But here's the problem with adaptations. They don't know when the danger has passed. Think about it this way. Imagine you grew up in a house where expressing your needs was met with irritation or silence, or the particular cruelty of being made to feel like a burden. So you learned, and you learned fast the way children do, to need less, to ask for less, to shrink the size of your desires so they fit more comfortably in the space you were given. That was smart. That was you, as a little girl or a young woman, reading the room and protecting yourself. I want you to honor that. That child did what she had to do. But that same adaptive self, the one who learned to need less, to ask less, to be less, she followed you into adulthood, into your marriage or your singlehood, into your friendships and your career and your relationship with your own mirror. And she's still running old software in a life that has genuinely changed. The threat isn't there anymore. But she doesn't know that. And so you stay small in rooms where you could stand tall. You edit yourself before you even open your mouth. You have a thought that could shift the entire energy of a conversation, and you swallow it like a pill that goes down bitter. Because somewhere deep, in a place that predates logic, you still believe that taking up space is dangerous. I think about the concept of the arena again here, because here's what most people miss when they talk about Brené Brown's beautiful, beloved interpretation of Roosevelt's words. The daring greatly, the showing up, the courage to be seen. What most people miss is the cost of staying in the stands. We talk a lot about the courage it takes to enter the arena. And yes, God, yes, it takes everything. It takes more than we think we have, and then it asks for more still. But we don't talk enough about what it costs to watch your own life from the bleachers. The quiet erosion of it, the way you cheer for everyone else's risks while your own unlived life sits beside you like a companion you've stopped introducing to people. The way you become fluent in the language of other people's dreams while your own grow rusty from disease. That has a cost too. It's just a slower cost. A cost paid in small daily withdrawals rather than one dramatic collapse. And because it's slow, because it's quiet, because it doesn't look like a crisis from the outside. Because you're still functioning, still showing up, still being useful and present and good, nobody sounds the alarm. Not even you. Especially not you. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes with being the strong one. And I think if you're honest, really uncomfortably honest, you know exactly what I mean. It's the loneliness of being in a room full of people who love you and still feeling like the truest version of you has never quite been seen. Like you've been loved for your function more than your essence. Like if you stop being capable and available and steady for 5 minutes, you might discover that the love was partly conditional. That fear right there. That's the wound beneath the wound for so many women I've known. Not that they aren't loved, but that they don't fully trust the love. Because the love has always seemed to arrive in response to their doing rather than their being. So they keep doing. Because doing feels safer than simply being. Because being means being seen. And being seen means being known. And being known means someone might see the parts you've spent a lifetime trying to make presentable. But here's what I need you to hear before we go any further. Those parts you've been hiding, the ragged edges, the unfinished longings, the complicated feelings you don't have words for yet, the dreams you've half abandoned, and the grief you've never quite processed, and the anger you were told wasn't ladylike, and the joy you've learned to keep at a respectable volume. Those parts aren't your damage, they're your depth. And the arena, your arena, the one with your name on it, the one that's been patient in the way that only true things can be patient. It doesn't want the polished version of you. It wants the real one. I want to tell you something that took me a long time to understand. And when I say a long time, I don't mean years in the academic sense, sitting with books and theories and frameworks. I mean the kind of long time that's measured in wrong turns and midnight realizations and moments where you thought you'd finally figured something out, only to discover you'd just found a slightly more sophisticated way of staying stuck. Here it is. Returning to yourself is not a dramatic event. I think we've been sold a story. By movies, by memoirs, by the particular mythology of female transformation, that the walk back to yourself looks like something. That it announces itself. That there's a moment of cinematic clarity where the music swells and you finally arrive. But that's not how it works. The walk back to yourself is quiet. It's unglamorous. It's Tuesday afternoon unglamorous. It's choosing in some unremarkable moment to tell the truth about how you're feeling instead of deflecting with humor. It's pausing before you say I'm fine and asking yourself if that's actually true. It's sitting with a cup of tea and letting yourself want something. Something specific, something yours, without immediately talking yourself out of it. It's small. It's repetitive. And it is, I promise you, the most radical thing you can do. There's a reason we resist it, though. And it's not the reason most people assume. People assume we resist returning to ourselves because we're afraid of failure. Afraid of trying and not succeeding. Afraid of stepping into the arena and falling short. But in my experience, that's rarely the deepest fear. The deepest fear, the one that lives underneath all the practical objections, underneath I'm too old and it's too late and who do I think I am? the deepest fear is actually fear of success. Fear of what it would mean to finally live as yourself. Because if you allow yourself to want things and pursue things and become things at this stage of your life, then you have to sit with the knowledge of all the years you didn't. All the years you kept yourself small and safe and useful. And that grief, the grief of unlived life, can feel like more than a person should have to bear. So it's easier, in a way, to stay where you are, to keep the arena at arm's length, to tell yourself the story that it's too late, because too late is a door that closes quietly, without drama, and you don't have to feel the full weight of choosing to close it yourself. But, don't you, that it isn't actually closed. You wouldn't be here, in this moment, feeling what you're feeling, if that door were truly closed. Let me introduce you to a concept that I think might change the way you see the next chapter of your life. Psychologists call it post-traumatic growth. But I want to rescue that phrase from the clinical distance it's usually delivered with. Because what it describes is something profoundly, beautifully human. It's the phenomenon, documented, studied, witnessed across cultures and ages, that the most significant expansions of the human self don't happen despite hardship. They happen through it. Not because suffering is good, not because you need it to be broken to be rebuilt, but because there is something in the human soul that, when pressed hard enough against its own limits, discovers capacities it never knew it had, discovers a self that is larger, more resilient, more interesting than the one that existed before the pressing. You have been pressed. Oh, you have been pressed. By life and loss and disappointment and the relentless, beautiful, exhausting work of loving people through their hardest seasons. By the expectations that arrived before you were old enough to question them. By the version of womanhood you were handed and told to wear, whether it fit or not. And here you are, still standing, still curious enough to be listening to this, still somewhere underneath everything, hoping. That's not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. I want to talk practically for a moment, because I think we owe each other that honesty. The walk back to yourself doesn't happen in the abstract. It happens in the specific. And the specific is where most of us get lost, because the specific requires us to actually choose something. So let me ask you a question. Not a rhetorical one, a real one. The kind I'd ask if we were sitting across from each other in a quiet room with nowhere else to be. What did you love before you were responsible for anything? Not what were you good at. Not what did people praise you for. Not what made you useful or impressive or easy to have around. What did you love purely for the sake of loving it? What made you lose track of time? What made you feel like the truest, most alive version of yourself? Because here's what I've found in all the years of sitting with women at this particular crossroads of life. That thing, it didn't leave. It went quiet. It learned to wait. It got patient in the way that only things rooted very deeply can be patient. But it didn't leave. And one of the most profound acts of self, return available to you right now, isn't therapy or reinvention or some sweeping life overhaul. It's simply giving that thing 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. Not to be good at it. Not to show anyone. Not to produce anything or prove anything or justify the time spent. Just to remember what it feels like to do something because you love it. That's where it starts. That unglamorous 5-minute Tuesday afternoon start. Margaret, the woman I told you about earlier, the one who didn't know who she was when nobody needed her. She came back to see me about 3 months after our first conversation, and something was different. Not dramatic, not cinematic, but different in the way that real change is different. Like the light has shifted slightly, like the air has a different quality, like the person in front of you is inhabiting their own body just a little more fully than they were before. I asked her what had changed. She thought about it for a long moment. And then she said, I started painting again. Not well. Just painting. In the mornings, before anyone else woke up. Just me and terrible watercolors, and the feeling that I was doing something for no reason except that it made me feel like myself. She paused. I'd forgotten what that felt like, having a reason that was just mine. I want you to let that land. Not the painting specifically. Your thing might be writing, or gardening, or music, or movement, or cooking without a recipe, or walking without a destination. It's not about the activity. It's about the claiming, the act of saying this hour, this morning, this small corner of my one wild life, this belongs to me. That's the first step into the arena. Not the leap, not the dramatic entrance, just the step. Just the quiet, private, revolutionary step. And I know what some of you are thinking right now, because I've heard it in 100 different voices over the years. But what about everyone else? What about the people who depend on me? What about the guilt? Oh, the guilt. Let's name it properly. Because it deserves to be looked at directly rather than allowed to operate in the shadows, where it does its most effective work. The guilt that tells you that time spent on yourself is time stolen from someone else. That your needs are an inconvenience. That a good woman, a real woman, puts herself last every time without complaint. I want to say this as gently and as firmly as I possibly can. That guilt is not your conscience. Your conscience knows right from wrong. Your conscience is a trustworthy guide. That guilt is a program. One that was installed early, reinforced often, and has been running so long in the background that you've mistaken it for wisdom. It isn't wisdom. It's an old, outdated story about what you're worth. And you are allowed, you are more than allowed, you are called to write a new one. Because here's the truth about the arena that nobody puts on the motivational posters. The people who love you don't need you to disappear into their lives. They need you to be alive inside your own. They need to see what it looks like when a woman decides she matters. When she stops apologizing for her hunger for meaning, for expression, for growth, for joy. They need that model, especially the women who are watching you. The daughters, the nieces, the friends, the younger women in your orbit who are quietly learning from you what's possible. What are you showing them as possible? What does your life, lived fully and without apology, give them permission to do? The arena isn't selfish. The arena is a gift. We've come a long way together in this conversation. And I don't say that lightly, because I know what it costs to stay present through the kind of honesty we've been sitting with. It's easier to scroll past. It's easier to file it under interesting and move on. It takes something, a particular quality of courage that I think you have more of than you give yourself credit for. To stay in the room when the conversation gets close to the bone. So before we go any further, I want to acknowledge that you stayed, and that matters more than you know. I want to paint you a picture. Not of some idealized future self who has it all figured out. I've made a career of being suspicious of that particular fantasy, but a picture of something realer and rarer and far more worth having. A woman in her arena. She's not young. She doesn't pretend to be. She carries the years on her the way a good tree carries its rings, not as damage, but as record. As evidence of seasons survived. Droughts and abundances and storms that she thought would end her and didn't. Her face shows the life she's lived. And she has stopped apologizing for that. She still has fear. Let me be clear about that, because I will never stand here and promise you a life without fear. Fear doesn't leave. Fear is part of the human contract, woven into us for reasons that made sense long before any of us arrived. But she has renegotiated her relationship with it. She no longer treats fear as a stop sign. She treats it as a compass. Because she's learned, through falling and getting back up and falling again in slightly more interesting ways, that fear most reliably points toward the things that matter most. That the presence of fear is less an indicator of danger and more an indicator of significance. If it scares you, it probably means something. If it scares you and you do it anyway, that's the arena. I want to talk about something that sits in the particular heart of this season of life. Because I think there's a conversation happening for women between 55 and 75 that the wider culture hasn't caught up with yet. The culture wants to talk to you about grandchildren and retirement and staying active and aging gracefully, which is all fine and good and has its place. But it rarely sits down with you and asks the question that I think is actually burning underneath. What do I do with everything I've accumulated? Not the things. Not the furniture and the photographs and the carefully folded linens. I mean the interior accumulation. The wisdom you've earned. The perspective that only comes from having been around long enough to watch cycles complete themselves. The hard-won understanding of what matters and what doesn't, which you now possess with a clarity that your 35-year-old self couldn't have accessed no matter how smart she was. You are, right now, at this exact point in your life, carrying more useful wisdom than you have perhaps ever known what to do with. And the question isn't whether that wisdom has value. The question is whether you're willing to trust it. To stop deferring to voices that are younger or louder or more confident sounding. To stop shrinking your certainties into questions so they feel less threatening in the room. To stop prefacing your insights with, well, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but that particular verbal habit that so many women develop, this constant self-editing before the thought has even finished forming. Your knowing is valid. Your experience is data. Your voice, in whatever room you choose to use it, deserves to take up its full amount of space. There's a woman I want you to think about. Maybe you've heard of her, maybe you haven't, it doesn't matter. Her name was Anna Mary Robertson Moses. You might know her better as Grandma Moses. She spent most of her life farming, raising children, doing the invisible, essential work that the world depends on and rarely celebrates. She didn't pick up a paintbrush seriously until she was in her late 70s. Late 70s. And she painted until she was 101. Now, I'm not telling you this because I think you need to become a painter, or because I believe in the tidy, inspirational arc of late, blooming genius stories. I'm telling you because of what her life represents beneath the surface of the charming anecdote. She didn't wait until she was ready. She didn't wait until she had permission. She didn't wait until the fear went away or the timing was right or someone looked at her and said, yes, now, this is your moment. She simply began in the middle of a life, in the middle of an ordinary day, with the materials she had and the time she had and the self she had, imperfect, aged, uncredentialed, magnificent. That beginning is available to you, right now, today. Not the version of beginning where everything is in place. The real version. The messy, imperfect, who do I think I am version that leads somewhere true. I want to speak directly to the voice inside you that is, right now, quietly compiling a list of reasons why this doesn't apply to you specifically. That voice is very good at its job. It's had decades of practice. It knows your particular weak spots with the intimacy of something that has lived alongside you for a very long time. It knows exactly which words to use. It knows whether to come at you with you're too old, or you're too tired, or it's too late, or the particularly sophisticated version, which is this is all very nice, but not everyone gets to live like that. I know that voice. I have my own version of it. And here is the only thing I've found that actually works against it, not arguing with it. Not trying to overpower it with positive thinking or affirmations or sheer force of will. Those approaches treat the voice like an enemy to be defeated, and you cannot defeat a part of yourself. You can only make it worse, give it more to push against, more reasons to dig in. What works, what actually, genuinely, in the lived experience of real human change works, is getting curious about it. When that voice says it's too late, instead of fighting it, you ask too late for what exactly? Too late according to whose timeline? Too late by what measure? And then you wait. Because most of the time, when you get quiet and honest, the answer that surfaces is not a real answer. It's a fear dressed up in the clothing of logic. It's an old wound doing what old wounds do, trying to protect you from pain by keeping you from possibility.